might only know histamine and Benadryl, and that's about all they know about it.
And all they know, yeah. Histamines are something our body uses all the time. They are not bad guys. They are things we use for regular common functions. Great example is your sleep cycle. About 4 o'clock in the morning, your brain releases histamine. Why? Keep you awake. Stays up there for the day if all goes well. Drops at night so you can sleep. Stays down at night. If your sleep is working properly, your histamine is doing this up and down in the brain. We also use histamine for digestion. So when you start eating, one of the things that are going to be released as part of the digestion process is histamine. And so histamine is not a bad guy. Overdoing histamine is the problem. So histamine in and of itself, that's not the target, if you will. The target is being able to use histamine in a nuanced way where it's going up and resolving and going up and resolving. That's how it's supposed to work. And so when somebody starts to realize that they're not handling histamine well, they may have very typical allergic symptoms, rashes, wheezing, eye watering, or heartburn, because that's often a gut histamine issue. And we can get antihistamine for that. So let me just give a little context on what an antihistamine is. It doesn't really actually go and break down a histamine molecule, at least not generally speaking. So the kinds that you can get at your regular drugstore, Claritin and Benadryl and blah, 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 Pepcid AC, which is the gut one. Those are antihistamines in the sense that they cover the histamine receptor. So they keep the histamine in the blood from doing what it would do normally. So it kind of stops how stimulating histamine might be left to its own devices, right? And that's one of the reasons why actually when you have a bad reaction, like somebody who's got bad allergies, the exposure to their allergens, say they're allergic to cats and they go to their friend's house and there's a cat, right? Ideally, they take the antihistamine before they get there, so the receptors are covered before they get exposed to their allergen. But let's say you get exposed to your allergen accidentally. You might have to take antihistamines for 2, 3, 4 days because the histamine has to work its way out of your system because you're just covering the receptors. So then you stop taking the antihistamine and ta-da, your symptoms come back, right? So it's a tool that people can use if they're having these kinds of histamine symptoms. And of course, they are available over the counter so people can make some of their own decisions about them. Interestingly enough, Benadryl, which is, they call it a first generation antihistamine, it affects histamine in the brain. That's why Benadryl makes you drowsy. It takes histamine down in the brain. So it's been remarketed as a sleep aid. It will help with sleep for people if what their problem with sleep is really a problem with histamine in the brain. So there's interesting things that we've kind of stumbled over in this whole business of how do we control allergy symptoms. And then for those who may have this oxalate plus histamine, sometimes, they have been managing themselves with something like antihistamines because that helps, but it doesn't get a lowered histamine in the body. So it's not exactly like the problem of insulin, but it has some similarities in the sense that maybe your histamine's running too high because your mast cells are too irritated because oxalate's been beating them up, and so they've been releasing more histamine than they should. So the challenge then is, how do we figure out who's the bad guy? And I'd say this is a really tough one because you've got two of them swirling together. They're cooperating, right?
Wow.
You're being tag teamed.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
You need kind of an approach where maybe you're managing both those things for a time, taking down the histamine in your food, taking down the oxalate in your food, and then, hanging in there while oxalate gets mobilized out of your system, because that you don't have any control over.